Hi everyone, my name is Astone. Thank you so much for being here. My project focuses on the impact of aircraft pollution through the lens of environmental health and justice. So as we all know, air travel can be really great. It contributes to the economy and offers an efficient method of traveling to faraway places, places that we can't get to by car or train. However, air travel also comes at a cost. Aircrafts emit ultrafine particles amongst other harmful pollutants into the atmosphere through a process called combustion. High concentrations of ultrafine particles are released during takeoff, and therefore ultrafine particle concentration levels are highest near airports. Ultrafine particles are a subcategory of the pollutant known as particulate matter. Particulate matter, or PM, is commonly referred to as PM10 or PM2.5. The number refers to the size of the particle that is being released. So for PM2.5, the particle is the size of 2.5 microns in diameter or less. Ultrafine particles have a diameter of 0.1 microns or less. The reason that scientists differentiate between the two is because ultrafines are so small that PM2.5 monitoring networks are unable to detect them. Also, the health effects differ between the two. Since this pollutant is not able to be detected by PM2.5 equipment, it is not regulated or monitored by the EPA. That means its presence is often unknown and ignored in a community. This can be quite dangerous considering it's associated with an increased risk of developing asthma, malignant brain tumors, cardiopulmonary diseases, premature births, low birth weights, and learning disabilities. After learning about this, I wanted to find out which communities are most exposed to these ultrafines and what solutions are out there to lower communities' exposure. To answer these questions, I interned with King County Medical Society, a nonprofit that offers a powerful voice and is a political advocate for physicians and patients at a local, state, and federal level. With them, I created a report on the impact of aircraft pollution and its effect on surrounding communities. During my internship, I conducted an in-depth literature review to learn more about ultrafine particles and the health implications associated with them. I also collected airport demographic data to understand which communities are most impacted by this issue. Lastly, I conducted interviews with an air pollution expert, state representative, lobbyist, and 2 environmental justice experts to learn how to solve this problem. So in my literature review, I was able to learn more about how ultrafine particles behave in our body. Because they are so small, air has the ability to push ultrafine particles into our bloodstream, allowing them to enter into different parts of our body. That is why exposure to ultrafine particles are linked to such a wide variety of negative health outcomes. Children, the elderly, and those with underlying health conditions are most likely to experience symptoms, develop conditions, and even have higher hospitalization rates when exposed to ultrafine particles. So as far as the results and which communities are most impacted, I found that across the entire United States in cities where there are large international airports, communities of color tend to live by these airports and are therefore more exposed to ultrafine particles. In my map in figure 2, you can see that on the left, there is average PM2.5 concentration, and then on the right, there's the amount of people of color. If you overlay these maps, you will see that there is a correlation between how many people of color live in an area and the level of pollution. And then looking at CTAC in particular, you can see that in my figure 3 here, a majority of the population is people of color. 68% in fact is people of color, and that includes Black, Hispanic, Asian, Pacific Islander, Indigenous, and other non-white identifying residents. I also wanted to see how income is a determinant for air pollution exposure. I found that, again, throughout the entire United States, lower income communities are more exposed to ultrafine particles and live near airports. In my figure 4 here, you can see that the residents in CTACs, their average annual household income is almost half of that of the people in Seattle. So I know that everything I've shared so far is a little gloomy and disheartening. However, there are solutions that can be implemented. In my interview with State Representative Jerry Paulette, I learned more about House Bill 1291, establishing a statewide air quality improvement program. This bill, if enacted, would allow participants of the program living in high air pollution zones to receive educational material on how to lower their air pollution exposure, and it would provide them with air pollution reducing technology, aka a HEPA filter. The goal of this bill is to lower air pollutant triggers that lead to hospitalization for children and teens. There are a few drawbacks to this bill, though. The first is that you have to receive some form of prescription from a healthcare provider to be in the program. This basically puts the burden of obtaining help on the victims of this environmental justice issue. Also, this bill has been in session twice now and has yet to have been passed. Luckily, when talking to Representative Paulette, I learned that there is hope for this bill in 2023, and there's also hope for it to be amended. The next solution, which may be the most effective, I learned during my interview with air pollution expert Dr. Astone, a professor here at the University of Washington. Since ultrafine particles are released due to the kind of fuel being used by aircrafts, we kind of talked about what would happen if we switched aircraft's fuel source. I don't know if y'all have heard yet, but the world's first 100% biofuel passenger plane took flight in March of this year. The fuel consisted of cooking oil and waste fats. Also, in 2021, United Airlines flew the first ever passenger flight using 100% sustainable aviation fuel, or SAF. If you're wondering what's inside SAF, you are not alone. They did not disclose this information, which is slightly worrisome, but hopefully it is a better fuel than what we are using today. The reason that switching fuel sources is the most ideal option is because ultrafine particles would no longer be released during the combustion process. Of course, biofuels have its own set of environmental issues, but in terms of ultrafine particle exposure, I'm marking this as a win. The last thing I wanted to mention in terms of solution is something I learned after talking with environmental justice experts BJ Cummings and Esther Min. They kind of talked about the importance of community-based and led solutions. This issue affects communities first and foremost. And so the solution will also affect communities first and foremost. That's why it's important that we not only ask community members what they want, but we have them be a part of whatever solution we come up with. Going forward, there's a lot that we as individuals, the government, and airlines can do to lower communities' exposure. The first is for individuals and groups to rally behind policies like House Bill 1291, or any other bill that lowers communities' exposure to air pollutants. It's also important that we speak out against aspects of the bill that we don't agree with. The next step is for governments to supply communities with materials and education on how to create their own box filter fan. Box filter fans are over 70% effective at lowering ultrafine particles in the room. And in my figure 5, you can see that it doesn't require too much equipment. Finally, I believe that it is the responsibility of airlines to begin funding more research on healthier fuel alternatives. As longtime Chief Corporate Sustainability Officer George Bandy Jr. says, we can no longer allow industries to privatize the wealth and socialize the risk. Too often in our society do we allow industries to profit at the expense of surrounding communities. While earlier I did mention a couple of aircraft using alternative fuels, we are far from that becoming the norm. Airlines need to take accountability for the impact that their aircraft have and invest in fuels that are more safe and healthy. With all of that being said, I just want to say a quick thank you to my site supervisor, Nancy Belcher, who provided me with this amazing internship, my faculty advisor, Dr. Burbacker, for sharing his time, knowledge, and resources with me so I could have everything I need to complete this project. And then I also just want to say thank you to my friends and family who have supported me throughout this project and my entire educational journey. Thank you for listening to my presentation.